Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an author, game designer, public speaker, many more, having worked for The Expanse, Call of Cthulhu, and again, many more. His new book, Castoff, releases this month. Please welcome Brandon Crilly to Epic Realms. Did I get that right? Was it Castoff? I'm looking at my handwriting. I'm like, my handwriting is horrible. It's Castoff, right?
Castoff is right.
Oh, I nailed it.
Good job.
There it is. Castoff. Jesus criminy. Sometimes I just need to slow down when I'm taking notes, right?
Yeah, I'm the exact same. Yeah, I hear that.
To start off, would you kind of introduce us to maybe a young Brandon Crilly? Like, what were you like in school, high school, stuff like that?
Damn, that's a good question. So a young Brandon Crilly was as much of a geek as present day Brandon Crilly is. And believe it or not, was an introvert. Was very like, shy. I don't want to talk to anybody. You're kind of almost stereotypical, like kind of on the outside sort of geek person. Big Star Wars fan, big Star Trek fan, much like I am now. But was just starting to get into writing, first of all. And just starting to get into, I kid you not, improv comedy. My high school had see, we're already going on a tangent, but my high school
No, it's not a tangent. That's what I asked you, right?
That's true. That's a fair point. That's it. Yeah. So so we had an improv comedy team at my high school, which all across Ontario we have these, and I tried out for it just on a lark when I was in the ninth grade, and got in. And it was like one of these things of like, no, I'm going to push myself outside my comfort zone, and then did it for 4 years. And that kind of broke me out of my shell. So depending on when you find me as a young person in high school, I'm either like incredibly nervous trying to figure out how to like talk to people, or I'm like the voice of the high school doing the morning announcements and speaking at grad and shit. Like it's a wild swing.
I think we're kindred spirits in that. That chronology. I did a lot of, it became in theater. I was like, I want to be a radio person, and I want to do comedy and all that kind of stuff. Did the morning announcements, all that stuff.
No way.
So right there with you. Yeah.
Okay.
So, did you have some favorite books growing up that you were reading?
I did. So I got into, if we're looking at high school, that was when I started reading Wheel of Time. So that was kind of my big, it was Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings. That was my big introduction to epic fantasy. And then Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen came a little later. I think it was first university I started those. And so those two, like, again, I don't think I haven't touched Wheel of Time in like 20 years because I ended up getting really tired of Wheel of Time partway through the series. But those are the big ones. And then before I started getting into like really contemporary sci-fi and fantasy, which is most of what I read now, it was Asimov when I was in grade 12, the foundation books. That was the first, actually one of the few kind of classic sci-fis that I really got into, but like the first kind of bit of like, kind of hard SF world building and stuff where I was like, well, this is really cool stuff. And prompted me to start kind of writing my own thing. So Asimov was big back in the day. Yeah.
Okay. What about role playing? When did role playing kind of come into your life?
See, that's interesting because that came way late. Okay. I had a friend try to introduce me. I say try only because we never really found time to play, but he tried to introduce me to D&D when we were in university. We were both like, I'm a high school teacher by day, and so we were both in like teacher training together. And he had, this is going to make a whole bunch of people cringe, but it was 4th edition was what he tried to teach me.
Okay.
And maybe that's part of the reason why I bounced off it. But I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. But so we tried that, and just for whatever reason didn't pan out. And then I would have been like in my mid-20s when I started playing Pathfinder with a group of friends. And so that was my first introduction to any sort of tabletop role playing. So it's an incredibly new thing for me. But I once we were playing Pathfinder and with that group, like it ended up like long term not really being the group for me. But I fell in love with the storytelling aspect and really the world building aspect. Like my GM for that Pathfinder game, he was coming up with all sorts of like his own original stuff, and I'd never seen anybody do that before. And so now I can't think of like not being actively playing some sort of game these days.
Yeah.
But up until I was about 25, it was not even on my radar really as a thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you decided to go to college, what
Yeah.
was your decision making like? I'm going to go there to be a writer. I'm going to go there to be a teacher. What did you go to college originally for? And then how did that
Yeah.
meld while you were in college and change, if it changed?
Yeah, so it worked out really well because so I went to it's like these weird, like one of those things like I don't believe in coincidence, or I don't believe in fate until I do, sort of things.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at a few universities in Ontario for teaching, and like the way they do it up here is you get, I don't know how it works elsewhere, but you can apply to three for the same fee, and then if you want to apply to more, you have to pay more, like for every program you're going to apply for. And so I had my three in mind, two in Toronto and one somewhere else. And then one of my guidance counselors mentioned offhand, "Oh, if you're interested in teaching, you should look at Queen's University, which is in Kingston, Ontario." And I had never looked at Queen's. I knew nothing about Queen's. I was like, "Oh," and then, but I scoped it out and was like, "Yeah, they have a teacher program, whatever." And it was my random fourth. And then for a couple of factors, one of which being it would be just far enough away from my family that they couldn't do day trips. I say with much love to my family because they might be watching. But so we did. Anyway, so I ended up going to Queens just because they call it a concurrent education program. So I was doing like teacher training with my undergrad at the same time. And while I was there, I think I was in second year. I heard that we had which still exists at Queens, we had a creative writing program, which was taught by this award-winning Canadian poet and novelist Carolyn Smart, who has since retired. But so it was one of these programs that you had to apply to get into. You had to write up a piece and send it in, and so I wrote a short story, which I still have a copy of somewhere. I don't know where, but I wrote this again sci-fi short story for her, and miraculously got in because it was a very lit heavy program. Like the
Okay.
expectation was you were doing poetry, you were doing lit fic, and I was like the random. I don't know why she let me in. Like I was the random sci-fi and fantasy author. And so, but so it like if I hadn't have randomly decided to go to Queens and hadn't randomly heard about this creative writing program, I never would have done it. And it was that program for a variety of reasons that that was where I made the switch to, oh, writing is kind of fun, and I dabble, to no, I want to do this professionally and have my stuff out there. It was second, third year university.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while you're there, did you pick
Yeah.
up any like little tidbits, whether it's advice or something from the actual curriculum, or it's just something you discovered while you were in school that you still carried with you to this day, or even
Oh
pass
God.
on to other people?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there were two things. One was like that, the again almost stereotypical acceptance of rejection, because I was sending off stuff to like university magazines, and I started submitting to places like fantasy and science fiction and Asimov's and analog, and like right when I was in university. And so very early on, I realized that most of what you send out, especially when you're just starting out, is going to get rejected. And so I think to learn that lesson as early as I did was really good, especially because like I could have, I sent out to everybody 10 stories, 12 stories, whatever it was, and did that and didn't like get all those rejections and then give up, right? As unfortunately a lot of people do. So I think that was really useful. But the other part that was really useful for me is we had a writer in residence program like that was part of the creative writing program. So you had a new writer in residence every year. And when I was in, yeah, when I was in third year, we had again this just amazing Canadian poet, Stuart Ross, who I'm still in touch with, and I still consider a mentor, like even all these years later. And so he came in, and he came into the writing residence program, being like, okay, I'm going to show you all this stuff, like what it means to be a professional writer, doing the hustle and trying to make it. Like he was this guy who, when he was in his 20s, like when I met him, he was in his 50s, I think, by that point. And so he was like in Toronto, standing on a street corner, trying to sell little poetry chapbooks with a sign that said, "Poet going to hell, please buy my books." Like just random, like avant-garde, punky sort of stuff, right? Like totally wild stuff, which he still does to this day. And so he's talking about all this stuff, and he kept organizing all of these workshops, and he's bringing in people from all over the province, and so he does this whole speaking series, and he does all the things. I went to almost none of them because I was too busy doing other stuff. And it was only after like a whole bunch of them had gone by I'd worked a little bit with Stuart, like I went to his office hours and talked to him a little bit. But he pulled me aside. He'd seen some of my work, and he was like, "Why haven't you been coming to any of these? Like, that's where you're going to meet other writers. That's where you're gonna learn craft from talking to other people. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I haven't made time for it." And he was like, "You got to make time for it. Like, you're missing out because again, because he's like, I'm only here for a year. I did all this stuff, and then I'm going to be gone. You don't know what's going to happen next year." And he was absolutely right. Like, that putting yourself out there however you can, right? I know
Right.
it's gonna vary depending on where you are, and like all sorts of things can affect whether or not you can go and access those spaces. But
Right.
if you can, like and as soon as I started doing that, then I started learning more and picking up more craft from that. But if I didn't have somebody like basically tell me point blank, get out there more,
Yeah.
then who knows where I'd be.
Yeah, for sure. So you had this writing, you were going to college for writing, you want to get out there and
Mhm.
writing.
Mhm.
But then we mentioned the role playing kind of came in
Mhm.
at
Mhm.
some point in here. When did you go, hey, well, I'm writing stories and telling stories, but I should try and write some RPG stuff too? Where where does that balance? Does that
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
later on? Is it kind of like kind of at the same time when you realize, hey, that's a venue that kind of
Yeah, yeah,
goes
yeah.
together with what you're wanting?
So it comes kind of in two fits and starts. This is the first time I've walked through kind of like the chronology of what I've done with anybody. So A, this is really cool. And B, as I'm articulating this stuff, I'm realizing how friggin' wild my backstory is. So like
This is
in
your
some
character
respect,
backstory.
right? Like there's a lot in there. I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of fits together. And so this is great. But no, so we're gonna flash ahead a little bit. Like I was here in Ottawa. This is 2013, 2014, something like that. And again, I'd gotten to know some writers here. And some folks that like we were talking about before we went live. So like folks like Gabrielle Harbowy and Marie Bilodeau, who's one of my best friends in the world, and just an incredibly phenomenal um, writer of many genres and stripes and whatnot. And so, largely through Marie, I got connected with Ed Greenwood
Okay.
because Ed he's here. He's another
Yeah.
Canadian author of some renown. Um, but what's funny is at the time, because I wasn't really super heavily into RPGs, I didn't actually know who he was. But so long story short, Marie was involved with I don't know if you remember this from back in the day, but Ed started this venture called the Ed Greenwood Group about 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. With Helma.
Yeah, so I got roped into tag, and it was because Ed like Ed's a sweetheart, and so he was looking for all sorts of authors that he could get. He's like, yeah, I don't care if
Yeah.
you've never written before in your life, come and join and
Yep.
play in the sandbox. And so I was doing some fiction for them, but I had a couple of friends of mine who were involved with tag who were going to do games, but that's the big thing that Ed wanted was he wanted a whole games line. And so I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember why or how,
Okay.
but next thing I know, I'm assistant editorial director for the games line.
Oh.
And like again, like I guess I knew enough about craft that they were like, yeah, you can go in. Like I wasn't in charge, but you can go in and support the editorial director. And like, here's what we want to do. We were working on, and when I say we, I mean like my role is very small, but we were working on the system QuickBlade that Ed had designed, which was going to be for the Tag games. And I don't know if that ever got released. And so like long story short, like Tag ended up folding before we ever released any of the game stuff.
Yeah.
And so all of that kind of just went up in smoke. And I was like, but it gave me like the taste of it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I think someday I want to do more games thing. And then it just so happened that I didn't get a chance to like do anything else professionally for like another, I don't know, 6 or 7 years or something. But it was like very early, like relatively early in my career. All of a sudden, like I'm in meetings with Ed talking
Right.
about stuff. When I think about it now and describe the story, is absolutely insane.
Right.
But that was the first little bit of like, oh, this could be cool.
That's Ed and the Helma and the Ed
Yeah,
Greenwood
Helmut,
Group.
that's it. Yeah, yeah,
And the
yeah,
Ed Greenwood Group was
yeah,
kind of when I was first doing podcasts in this genre for
oh,
another
okay.
podcast. That's where I met one of the places I met a lot of people
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
through that, trying to promote that. So
Yes, yeah, yeah.
so
Well, yeah,
yeah,
because Eric DeB was in there and all these folks, right? Yeah. So I
yeah,
was. So Marie wrote for Helmut. I've got a copy of the book, I think, here in my office. It's Eye of Glass, which is she's now released on her own, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just an amazing book. or sorry, she's in the process of releasing on her own. And so I was writing stuff on the Storm Talon side, which was the fantasy side. And then actually, strangely enough, Catalyst, which ended up being my first novel, I know we'll get to that, was originally supposed to be for TEG. It was
Oh,
the first couple of chapters of it were initially going to be I'd written it as a short story for Folklore the Affliction, which was one of the horror
yeah.
settings. But then again, it never, because everything folded, it never got published. And Ed was like, "Yeah, like do what you want with it." And so I,
Which
you know,
again, Ed, amazing person to just be
he,
like,
he is like
it's your stuff.
one of the
You did it.
best people, like especially for someone who has the standing and the career and the notoriety that he has, but is just a kind-hearted soul, like genuinely wants to help anybody who needs it. Like that is absolutely the best.
When you start moving forward then and start writing books,
Yeah.
is it short stories in magazines and articles for things, kind
Mhm.
of where is that next step, where is that next
Yeah.
foot in the door to actually getting fully published stuff of your own?
Yeah. So I did. So I think like probably around like once I was doing the tag thing, I think that was when I kind of decided in my head that what I wanted long term for my career was novels and games of some variety. Like those are the two things that
Yeah.
like like I want to do and I want to get to and that I want to like be known for, I guess, in a way. But again, like I'm just starting out, and so most of my early like my uh most of my early credits are all short fiction because the advice that I got from a lot of friends, and I don't think it was good advice, was that if you want to go trad pub and you want to get the attention of agents and publishers and whatnot, especially being up here in Canada, a way to do that is to get a bunch of short stories published in like the pro magazines, and then you've got a body of work, and then you can go to an agent and be like, "Oh, I've already got all this stuff published. I clearly can write.
Right.
Here's my novel." And so I shifted to doing that, and I hadn't done a lot of short fiction. I'd done a little bit of short fiction writing in university, and I'd had a few sales, but it wasn't my focus. And then, but I had some very smart people here in Ottawa who were like, "No, you should like that's a way to get some cred." And so I started doing that, and then the next thing I knew, I was writing more short fiction, just kind of doing novel stuff on the side, and and then next thing I know, I got like 40 or 50 published short stories, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then you start getting, but it's the progression, right? Like I went from, my first 10 or 12 or something stories, we're all like unpaid markets or small markets. They're like good markets, don't get me wrong.
Right.
They were really, really cool mags, but a lot of startups. And then eventually you get to a point where, okay, now I'm getting 2 cents a word, and then now I'm getting 5 cents a word. And that was, really like the way it was used. The reason it was useful for me is because you're still honing your craft, right? Like I was honing I think my concision, especially, and how to say multiple things with a single sentence, which is I think like a really important part of someone's craft. How to have a character jump off the page from like the first paragraph,
Right.
because that's as useful for novels as it is for short fiction. So I think that's where I honed that, and so that very much kind of led into my novel work and like leveled up the novels I was writing so that I was eventually found a home home for the first two at least.
We talked a little bit about your teaching. It's been mentioned.
Yeah, it has.
Where does that fit in going into and becoming a teacher as well as doing all
Mm.
this, and how do you balance the two?
Oh man, that is a good question. I that's actually a tough question because and it might be we can linger on this as long as you like because there's I have a very different thought process about teaching now than I did, let's say 7 or 8 years ago. Like I'm
Right.
I'm almost 15 years into being a high school teacher, and again, I realize I'm saying this to someone in Canada where things are a little different, but
We have
um
Canadian listeners.
oh, good. Okay. So whenever I start talking, like
We've got a
whenever I
lot of
start,
Canadian listeners. Yeah.
perfect. I'm glad. But no, I'm always cautious because like when I start, because I'm going to start talking about how like teaching in Ontario is really tough, and I realize I say that knowing how things are in other countries like the
Right.
United States, and so I try to couch it a little bit, but um like teaching genuinely is really hard, and the thing with teaching is if you're doing the job right, it's a very creative job, right? Like you got to be coming up with new lesson plans. You got to be coming up with new activities, and like I like a lot of my creative juices I think just naturally go into my teaching practice and did for a long time. I always think of it as like teaching is basically I do three 75-minute um, one-man shows a day, and I bomb a lot. Like it's not like I go and do, if you like we were talking about Gen Con, right? Like I go and do a workshop at Gen Con, and every joke lands, right? Like I'm talking about I'm talking about games and game design, and everybody's with me because everyone's there. It's very different in a classroom with a bunch with a bunch of teenagers, right?
Right.
I think I think teenagers get a bad rap um, for a lot of unfair reasons, and I think the teenagers have a ton of insight, and they see the world the way it's supposed, like the way it really is. And you can work with teenagers in a way that you can't with younger kids, right? Like people who do elementary and primary school are doing incredible work, and I've never want to do that. But I think nowadays, like I feel like I'm getting very rambly with this answer, but the more involved I get as an author, like the more success I've had as an author and a game designer, and the more work I'm getting, the harder it is to be a teacher at the same time because because that creative well you've only got so much.
Right.
Um, so like it's really complicated. I think being a teacher, I know a lot of writers are teachers, but I'll be honest, I don't know that I will be a teacher for the whole time that I'm a writer.
Right. Are
Yeah,
there things as a teacher that you're
yeah.
in a classroom, you're teaching something and something comes
Mhm.
up or whatever, where you're like, oh, this is an interesting thing I learned about, interacting or about
Mhm.
whatever, and then go, this applies to writing.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you get you get kind of the unfiltered responses from teenagers a lot, and that definitely feeds into the writing. Um, like you get some wild personalities in the classroom, and and especially when you get kids who haven't um, conform is not, I don't think it's quite the word I'm looking for, but that's what I'm going to go with. Like who haven't, they're not in the they're not in the real world yet, in giant scare quotes,
Yeah.
and so they're still themselves. They're not, they're not sitting behind a desk in an office complex yet.
Yeah. They're not behind the
Um,
facade of some
yeah, they're like
personality.
yeah, right. Like they are in the sense that like high school is often about wearing a mask, and
Right.
but there's not they don't have the adult mask on, and so like you get some just like some wild comments, and so I've based some characters on, not directly on any of my students, but like I've drawn some inspiration. I'll give you an example. So I had a student, um we this is a long time ago, that's like 10 years. I was teaching a grade 10 history class, and I forget what it was. I forget what it was that I had said, but I made some comment about like their next test or something. And I had the student who jokingly said, okay, so at whatever, 10:02 in the morning on such and such date, you promised that, such and such would not be on the test. And she writes it down. And yeah, and that became her thing. Like, she did this like two or three, like, or more than two or three times. She did this throughout the semester. Okay, you said such and such. I'm writing it down, Mr. Crilly. Like, don't fuck us over. And so then, um, so just that little kernel of a thing, I was like, oh, that's interesting, and it kind of stuck in my brain. And so it ended up becoming the structure for one of my first ever um, pro-paying stories. I sold a story to Daily Science Fiction called Moments, and it's about these two time travelers. Sorry, it's about these two time travelers. It's told from the perspective of one time traveler, and the whole thing is written as these statements about moments in time. And so it's something like, at whatever, 1:15 in the afternoon on such and such a date in 1776, this happened. And it's just three lines, almost like a poem. And that was directly from like what that's, just this random offhand thing that the student had said, that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and like, I think outside of the classroom, that's sometimes rarer depending on what sort of business you're in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do any of your students ever come in knowing or eventually realize your work as a writer as well? And does that ever help you? Like, hey, you wrote this game that I played, or hey, you wrote this short story or this book. Do they even know?
They do now.
And does that give you any cred in the classrooms?
Zero credit. Absolutely zero credit. Most of the time, like I do a little intro on the first day, and I'm like, I'm so and so, and and I don't like embellish it. I'm like, yeah, I'm an author. I might mention geeky stuff, and I move aside, and then eventually, like they'll they'll realize that there's a little more to it than that, and like there's books and games and stuff. So for the most part, no. But then every once in a while, a kid will come up to me, and like our school librarian, for example, is very kind and has my first book in the library. And so every once in a while, a student will find it and be like, well, I know that guy, and I read fantasy. And so they'll be like, sir, I'm reading your book. And I'm like, oh, great. that Go review it on Goodreads. No.
Yeah.
So I think again, the funny thing is that a lot of what they think a writer should be and what they think would be cool about writing is it doesn't really match our reality. Like, they find out that I'm a writer and they're like, oh, so J.K. Rowling? No, I don't. I no. Stephen King? No, I like they know like five writers.
Right.
And then I'll mention all this stuff, like because I teach creative writing at the senior level, and so I'll mention all these people that to me are huge names in our industry, and because they're not like the top 10 writers that the whole world knows.
Right.
They're like, who? And I'm like, no, seriously, go and read this person. They're like, yeah, whatever. And then
Right.
so I do accept really early that there's this huge disconnect between them and me that I don't think will ever get bridged, like except for maybe like one or two kids.
Yeah. Yeah. We mentioned the short stories, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't really what you were going for to start, but then you're like, we're going to do short stories.
Yeah.
What is for you? Because me, when I write, I've tried writing long form novel a million times, and I can't get past like a chapter 5. But short stories, I so much enjoy writing them and doing them and putting them out there. For you, what is kind of the difference between putting together a short story and a novel? Especially whether it's the way the story is, the pacing, the structure. What are some of the big differences to you?
I mean, for me, it comes down to typically an idea and or a world. I think more often it's a world, which is part of the reason why I've gotten more and more into games writing. Like if there's more to kind of the core conceit of the world that I'm playing with than you can capture in 6,000 words, then that's a novel. But it has to involve a character that I know I want to spend that much time with. So like if I have, like I'll give you another example. Like I had a short story years ago, one of my climate fiction stories, which was the core premise was that when you die, the government comes in and they calculate what I called a carbon footprint tax. So the government comes in and they're like, okay, we're going to assess your life and how much of a detrimental impact you had on the environment while you were alive, and we're going to come up with, there's some sort of algorithm arithmetic that totally exists that I didn't come up with because I'm a humanities person, not a math person, but I'm sure it makes perfect sense in world. And so they do this thing, and then whatever amount they come up with, that basically gets taxed off of your estate, like whatever is left behind. And to me, like when I came up with that idea, I was like, I can't stretch that for 80,000 words. Like that's it's an idea I want to play with. But I'm pretty sure I can get my point across in it ended up being really short. It was like 2,000 words or something. Because I think once you establish that that's the conceit, there's only so much magic in an idea like that before it starts to feel a little belabored. And so once I had my character for it, and once I had my character for it, I was like, yeah, this guy doesn't have 80,000 words in him. Like great character, but I was like, yeah, I think we're okay. Whereas something like one of the novels that I'm finishing up right now is about, like, I'm a big fan of legal dramedies, like The Good Wife and Suits and Boston Legal and stuff like that. And so I've always wanted to write a story like that. And so the one that I've got right now is it's a legal dramedy. It's set in the far future, and it has to do with terraforming law. Like, what do you like? You're trying to heal the galaxy and make worlds, and what's all the legal structure? But it's like an office comedy. And so like that idea, there's so much you could pull from that, right?
Yeah.
Like I think like a really masterful short story writer could probably write a really compelling short story that's like 8 or 10,000 words, and just play with that. But as soon as I had that idea, I'm like, no, there's so much more that I want to do. So I think really, I think what it comes down to is like my level of excitement for the idea and how much it kind of fires off the neurons. And I think like to me, that's the difference between um, short story idea versus novel idea, which I'm sure like 100 other people are going to disagree with.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's why I said
that's
your
at least
opinion.
my
It's your
process,
opinion,
right? Yeah.
right? What is your way of putting the story? Are you I put an outline down, I have A, B,
Mhm.
C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, or are you kind of a by the seat of the pants, maybe have a general idea sort of
Yeah, yeah,
person?
yeah.
How do you build your stories?
So short fiction, it's like yeah, I just kind of scribble a few notes and see what happens. For novels, I'm kind of like one of those halfway in between sort of people. Like I spend a lot of time on character. I spend a lot of time on world before I start writing, but I give myself um, a lot of like the edges aren't penciled in, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that way, because like, which is part of the reason why I'm halfway between like I like when I'm writing, like I like to be in the moment with a character and like describe the location as they're discovering it. So I want like I find if I have everything outlined, it takes the fun out. It takes some of the magic out of it for me. But I need to know, which is it's gonna like again, you try to describe this to a non-writer and it sounds nonsensical, but like I need to know what the ending's going to be, obviously. Which I know for a lot of pantsers they don't need that, but like um, I need to know what the ending is, and I need to know kind of the broad strokes of how I'm going to get there. But that's it because typically what will happen, and I know I'm not the only author who does this. Like I'll get about a third of the way in. I'm one of those people that like you get about a third of the way in and then realize that you had a much better idea, and then you go back and redo the third a couple of times.
Yeah.
Which I do, like I know Mike Chen does this, and I know a couple other folks who do it. And so that's kind of so like that's like I don't do a really rigid outline past the first third because I know it's all going to change anyway. But when I'm revising, that's when I have a really strict, like,
Okay.
here's what happens chapter by chapter. Because like when I'm going in and finessing and kind of with the scalpel and making sure that everything fits, I again, the busier I get and the further along I get, the more I start to forget stuff. And so I need that, like, those chapter by chapter notes. But when I'm drafting, kind of middle of the road, so to speak.
When you're teaching, what do you tell your students as far as what, like, do you like, this is what you should do? Or are you like, here are some of the options of how people do it?
Yeah. So it's options, but what's wild is I'm not convinced that my students actually appreciate it, but I do it anyway. Is they're so used again. I don't know how things like essay writing and English lit are taught elsewhere, but like the way we do it in Ontario is it's very prescribed. It's like here's your strict 5 paragraph essay format, and you got to follow this, and you're going to practice it every year in English, and you go off to university, and you'll do it again. And to me, that's always been too rigid. Like, and so especially in my creative writing class, but even my
I was
the
gonna
other
say it
courses,
takes away from the creative in creative writing.
it yeah, that's it, right? And so when they come in for me, I say to them right from day one, you can write whatever you want. I don't care. Like I'm gonna go over stuff with you. Like we're gonna go through like when I teach character, I go through like 3 or 4 different ways of conceptualizing character and like, do you want to do a detailed character sketch? Do you want to just come up with 2 things? Like, and I say to them, pick the one that makes the most sense to you. And there's a certain percentage of students who love that but those are the ones that I like are already they already know they want to be writers and they're
Right.
just kind of looking for bits in the toolkit. I think for what I've noticed more and more is for students who are new to creative writing um or need a really rigid structure, like they hate that because they're like, I don't know what to do. And unless they're willing, and I say to them, just okay, try this one. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. Then you can try this one. And a lot of them struggle with that. Like they want to know, no, A plus B equals C. I'm going to do this right now and it's going to work.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's yeah. So I leave it very open, but a lot of them are like, eventually they get used to it. But at the start, they're like, I don't want to do that.
Now we talked about your outline and writing format
Mm,
for short stories, for
mm,
longer
mm.
form, the difference between short story and longer form. But I'm going to insert now games writing
Yeah, yeah.
into that. How does that differ, and how does whether it's the structure for you differ, and how does the prep and creation process differ for you?
Mm, mm, mm. There's much more outlining for me when it comes to games writing, and part of that is because almost all of my games writing so far has been freelance stuff for other companies, right?
Right.
So like say like whoever it is, whether it's for the Expanse or somebody else, like they've got kind of their in-house format. They've got the whatever points in the adventure or style or whatever that they want you to hit. And so like right at the gate, and usually you're on more of a timeline, right?
Right.
And so for me, that like the only way that I can do it um on time is to have more of an outline. Um but and what's wild is like I write very linearly in my fiction. Like I'm not one of these writers that can jump around and I'm going to write chapter 2 and then I'm going to write chapter 30 and I'm going to with games writing, if I'm writing an adventure, I do the same thing. I have to go like, right from the start all the way through. But I'll have my outline of like, okay, we're gonna, act one is this and act two is this, and it's all very strict. And because you got to think about things like, your how many creatures am I through? Like, what's this encounter going to be? Because there's a lot more balance that you have to do,
Right.
and in a way that like if you're going to break any rules, you got to be a lot more careful than you do when you're writing a book. Um, and so there's that aspect of it. But like when I'm doing, say, like a setting or like a micro setting for somebody or some sort of supplement, that's the only instance in my writing when I can just kind of bounce around and it's like, okay, I'm gonna write this little bit and then I'll do this little bit and then I'll do this little bit. And because you're kind of like you're cobbling this world together or whatever it is. And so it doesn't have to be linear. And so, but to discover that I'm actually capable of doing that was interesting because I'd never written like that before. And I think that's part of the reason why I can do both is because I have a very different approach to both. And I think my brain comes at it very differently. So I can have, you know, a novel in progress and a games thing in progress, and another games thing in progress. I think if I was writing them all the same way, I'd have to just do one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. That
Okay.
totally makes sense. Because burnout is real, right?
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah. Is it ever?
I
Yeah.
want to.
Can I ask you a question? When you're doing short fiction, um do you have multiple stories on the go at once, or is it one and
It's usually just one for
just the
myself.
one? Yeah.
I mostly write for myself. I've had
Okay,
a
fair.
few.
Yeah.
I've got a mystery that I wrote that I'm really proud of. It
Nice.
was originally set in the Eberron world,
Oh, okay.
and then I changed it because I was like, this is really good. I've had multiple people say
Yeah.
this was really good. You should do something with it. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to do something with it, I got to de-Eberronify it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and I still sit on that, and I still go back and I reread it. And I'm like, man, this is so good. This is so
Nice.
good. But
That's awesome.
I'll just do short stories for myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's oftentimes like I have a story I want to tell. I kind of have an idea how it's going to go.
Right. Okay.
I know the beginning, I know the end, I know the purpose of the
Yeah.
story,
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
then I write. And yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of how I go with it. But
Okay.
obviously, I
Yeah.
don't publish anything. It's mostly just for me. Although I've
Yeah.
thought about it on multiple occasions, and I've been told multiple times I should follow through. But I'm like, nah, worries in the back of the head,
Yeah.
sort of
The brain weasels, right? I
situation.
hear you. Yeah.
What's the process, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. I would like to change and shift topics a
Yeah.
little bit because
Do
recently
it.
you did something that I thought was really cool, and I was like, I
Hmm.
got to bring this up. I don't
Sure.
really
Yeah.
know where exactly to fit it in
Right
to
now.
what we're talking about, so we're going to fit it in right now
Let's do
because
it.
we've kind of covered some of the things that I'm pretty sure have a little bit to do with it, whether it's the
Okay.
teaching, whether it's the writing, whether it's the D&D, whether it's the
Sure.
speaking, which is your TEDx
Ah, the TED thing. Yeah. Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
because I thought that was so cool. I was like, oh, this is super cool.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know kind of what the process for that was like for you,
Okay.
and why you ended up doing it.
So, the like in terms of how I got the gig, and then I'll talk about the talk itself. So it was a TEDx EOM. And conveniently it was at a local high school here in Ottawa, and so it's like I'd be in that way, right?
Right.
Because I I teach here in Ottawa,
Yeah.
and so but the invite like blew me away because we're in this city where we've got expertise of all sort of like coming out of our ears. Like we are our high school had hosted a this like STEM summit the year before,
Okay.
and they were pulling in people from all over the place, like incredibly cool, incredibly insightful people. And so, but students at my school knew this. Funnily enough, to go back to your previous question, like some of the students at the school knew that, like they knew that right, and they knew a little bit about games, and so they were like, "Do you want to come and talk about writing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can talk about writing." And because because it's TEDx, right? Like it's like a grassroots kind of organization,
Yeah.
or grassroots session of TED, right? They had it wasn't like I had to pitch the talk,
Right.
but it wasn't like they came and asked something particular. They were just like, oh, just send in the pitch. And so I was racking my brain trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about because I didn't want like it's friggin' TED. I can't just go up there and talk about like
Right.
lighting and stuff, right? So I was like, holy crap. And so I was talking to my wife and I was kind of brainstorming ideas. And so I was like, okay, I can talk about something games related as opposed to just writing craft related. And I was like, okay, what can I talk about the game that's games related? Because TEDx, like the way that this one was, it's primarily targeted at youth, or at
Yeah.
least this one was. And so I was like, okay, what can I do that's going to be, hopefully useful for teens and but also for adults because it's going to be a mixed bag in the audience.
Right.
And like, it is going to feel like it's worthy of a TED talk. Like it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up landing on was like, and I think some of the best TED talks out there are ones that are rooted in your personal experience, right? Like what's
Right.
in as much as any of our lives are truly unique, what's kind of what's the angle that you can take that maybe no one else is going to take. And for me, it's like it's the role, like it's something I've come very, very recently to in D&D and tabletop in general. It's the role playing aspect and the ability to lose yourself in a character and um what that teaches you about yourself.
Yeah.
Almost I like almost like people joke like D&D is like free therapy. Almost like that.
It's the joke. It's a joke. Wait a second. What?
The very serious truth of how no, so that's what I ended up focusing on. And so the talk was like once I got in my head, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about, and pitched it in, and miraculously they said yes. It was incredibly cool because it was a chance to talk about um one of my more recent D&D campaigns that I had played that had wrapped shortly before I did the TED talk, and it was with a bunch of other writers, all of whom are in the States other than me, so it was all on Zoom and Discord, where it was what I only recently learned the term hardcore D&D. I don't know if that's a very common term, but just absolute hardcore storytelling where what was supposed to be a casual game, I was lied to by the DM. He was like, it's gonna be totally casual West Marches style campaign, and it consumed so much of my life. Like I lost sleep, and this is one thing I talked about in the talk was like how much a game like that, when you're all committed to the role playing aspect of it, can just consume your life, but in a healthy way, right? Like and so the realization of things like you know like real concerns that like real fears that I have that I hadn't dealt with that come about the role playing. And so I can go into more detail, but that was the process, is like, how can I talk about something that I love, which is D&D, with my writer friends, and turn it into something that was useful. And I hope that my sense was that people enjoyed it, but it was absolutely surreal from start to finish that I was able to just go up on a stage with TED symbols behind me and talk
Right.
about role playing, and being a writer was just unreal.
How did that different from doing like panels and conventions and speaking at Gen Cons and stuff like that?
I mean, it's very different than panel, because part of the reason why I like a panel is because I think it goes back to my improv days. Like it's like a panel. You're if depending on who you're paneling with, and
Right.
not all panels are created equal. If you can bounce off other people, then like that makes for the best panel. The reason why I like a panel is because it's not just you, it's you and whatever, 3, 4 other people,
Right.
and you can popcorn off of each other and whatnot. And so when you're doing a TED talk, like it's just you. And in a way that's different than teaching, right? Like when I'm teaching in my classroom, if 20 minutes in the lesson goes off the rails, who cares? We're the only ones who are in there, and the kids don't really care. Like unless you're truly not a good teacher, they give you a surprising amount of grace if if the video doesn't work or you forget what you were going to do or whatever.
Right.
So the TED talk, it was very different in that I felt a little bit more of that spotlight on me. And so like normally when I'm doing a con or I'm doing something like this, I don't like, it's not, I don't prep, right? Like, cause I'm showing up to talk about something that I already know about. Like, I don't really, like, I find I don't need notes.
Yeah.
But for this TED talk, I was like I had my script, which normally because you have to have a script for a TED talk.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I
don't they
almost
require that? Don't
they
you have to
do, yeah,
submit it?
yeah,
You have
yeah,
to
right.
submit
Like,
your script.
yeah. Although I'm not convinced that everybody who was there at that one had a script.
Or
I don't know
followed
what
it.
yeah, I don't know what they submitted. But no, so that's, yeah, but like, so not, I could have just submitted the script and not looked at it again, right? But no, like for weeks, I was going over and I was here in my office at the door closed. I was prepping it and getting my timing right, and which I never do. But for something like that, like you feel this extra pressure of like I can't half-ass it because odds are I will never do another TED talk. Like let's be real, um, like TEDx or otherwise. And so even like regardless of how big the audience is going to be and whether it ever ends up on YouTube or whatever, um like I kind of knew that like you have to go in and kill it. And I go into every, like when I'm doing a panel or like I always go in and try to bring my A game because for the sake of the audience. But
Right.
like for a TED talk, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit
Yeah,
about some of your recent works.
sure.
So we'll start off by talking about some of the games, right? You did some work
Yeah.
with Gallant Unite Games,
Mhm.
with Pocket Quest. Tell us a little bit about those.
Mm.
What your work was, how you got into that, what you hope to do in the future with those, if
Yeah, yeah,
anything.
yeah. I mean, the future hope is to just constantly be working, really.
Right.
No, so I'm trying to the order in which I got them. So I started off. So again, Tag is the first one, and then a lot of big gap in the middle where I'm not doing anything, or I'm not doing anything games related, and then I get back into it. And so my kind of first jump back in was not Gallant. It was Fat Goblin Games, which is now changed hands to different owners, and I don't even know what they're doing anymore. But was had when I got into it was owned by Rick Hershey, who is, I don't know if you know Rick, but like he's one of these guys he's mostly an artist and works for everybody. Like his art is everywhere in tabletop role playing stuff. But he also had this publishing house, Fat Goblin, and so I got in on that. They were also doing Tiny D6 stuff, which is what Gallant Night Games
Okay.
does. And so it's one of these things where like I knew a guy who was working for them, and so he was like, "Yeah, like we need another person. Do you want to come and play?" And I'm like, "Done." And so I got a chance to work on. Actually, I have it here at my desk. I got a chance to work on this, which is Bestiarium Vocabulum, which is a
Yeah.
bestiary
It's a
for
gorgeous cover, though. Gorgeous cover.
so good. So that's Rick's art. And I forget which creature that is, but yeah, so that's all Rick. And so what Rick had done was he has I think still does a Patreon of just like creatures. Like he'll just draw up a sketch of some random monster and just throws the art up on his Patreon for people to use however they like. And so he was sitting on like hundreds of these incredible pieces of art. And he had gotten permission from Alan Bear, who would for the license for Tiny D6, and was like, let's do a bestiary. But it's this huge book, right? Like it's gigantic.
Right.
And so they need more people to come on and write it. And so it was this phenomenally cool. It was a very cool way to get back into games writing because I had all these pieces of art, and it was like, take this piece of art and tell me what the monster is. And I was like, okay. And very little restrictions other than like you couldn't do like it was a list of creatures that we couldn't use because they'd been used somewhere else. And it's all your basic stuff. Like it can't just be a troll. It can't just be a goblin. It can't just be a Pegasus. It's got to be something else. And then so that additive it was like this real creative test of I'm looking at this drawing and I have to decide that I didn't draw and I have to decide what this creature is and come up with stats and whatnot. And one of them, I kid you not, is a friggin' Pegasus. Like I'm looking at
Pegasus.
but I can't do a Pegasus, and so I'm looking at it like, oh man, what the hell? And so I came up with this thing called a shield wing, which is like it's like if essentially if a Pegasus couldn't fly, but its wings were like armor plated instead. And so it's like for infantry, like it's ground based military like sort of creature. So it was this amazing creative exercise of trying to work yourself around these drawings. And so again, so it was this phenomenal project. We worked on that for about a year, and it was one of these things where I think like I hate to say this because I know it sometimes frustrates people, but like I got that gig because I knew a guy, and then from there it's I've got this example of what I can do, and then I like Gallant Knight Games is tied to these guys, and so I do a little bit of work for Gallant Knight Games, and then it just kind of dovetails from there. So everything goes back to this, but it's all been honestly it's been either direct like connection, like so and so knows so and so, and it's like, oh yeah, Brandon can do good work, or I can hold up my existing portfolio and be like, hey, I've done this stuff. Do you need anybody? And occasionally somebody's like, yeah, we could use another person. Here's this thing, which is a gamble on their part. So it doesn't happen very often, but that was at least the start. And then it's just been, I've been surprisingly busy ever since, or not busy, consistent. I've always had something I'm working on. Over the past few years, which is pretty cool.
You also did some writing for Kobold, right? You do some freelance.
Yes, yeah, I did some stuff, for the Kobold blog.
I think I saw, and it stood out to me in my memory because we're currently watching the Agathol alongside.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't gotten to it, so we just started. We're on like episode 3 or 4, and then I saw that. I was like, wow, this is timing.
That worked out great. Yeah, yeah. The Agatha thing was very cool. So it was split into 2. And so it was like witches you can take on the road. So it was just like new witch creatures for Tales of the Valiant, but inspired by characters from the show. Kobold was interesting, and I think I don't know if anybody who's listening is for anyone who's interested in getting into games writing. I think what's been useful for me the past few years, like as I've gotten back into this, is like with Kobold, I went to the editor for the blog, and I was like, "What do you need?" Right? Like I can write a whole bunch of stuff. What's useful for you? Right? Like, do you need, a creature thing? Do you need do you need traps? Like the first thing I did for them was a bunch of traps inspired by movies.
Yeah.
Like what is it? Like what's going to be useful for you? And I think what I found working with editors, and it's certainly true of Kobold, it's been true of others too, is like, it's one thing to go and be like, I want to write X, right? Like you go to a publisher, like I want to write, I want to write a Star Trek Adventures thing or whatever. But if you can go to them and be like, hey, like, I've got this skill set with writing or editing or whatever, do you have a gap? What's the gap? Done. I'll do that. Because I find and that I think people appreciate, because it's like, oh, you're willing to, it's like starting in any career, right? It's like, oh, you're willing to do perfect.
Yeah.
And kind of earn your way. And then eventually they'll be like, what do you want? Right. And then, so I think like kind of offering yourself out there, I think it is incredibly useful for anyone who's trying to start out. It certainly has been for me, but
yeah. You touched back. You said something earlier, and I want to rewind because it just popped in my brain. Something you said earlier. You said something about like telling your story, and not that your story is super much different than everybody else's.
Yeah.
But I do want to predicate this entire show. We've had over 100 episodes of authors all around, and I have yet to find an author that's been the same as another one as far as their storyline goes, as far as their process goes, as far as like how their journey into becoming an author goes. Nobody's been duplicated. There are similarities, there are ties, there are things that people have, like, oh yeah, my first game was Redbox, whatever, or
exactly,
these are my favorite authors, but the journey's almost across the board different for everyone, and that's why I do the show. That's why I cover those topics and talk about growing up and all that, because people are like, I always say, if they can get invested into you as the person and your story of how you got there, then they're going to want to look at your stuff too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And
Yeah.
everybody's story is unique. Everybody's story is just fascinating. Everybody's story
Yes.
is something that you can learn and grow from. So
Yeah.
don't count yourself out. You are unique. Trust me.
No, thank you. I appreciate that because that's also partly my like you mentioned the voice in the back of your head, right? Like
Right.
that's the very Canadian self-deprecation of like whatever. I'm sure people have heard this before. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm unofficially Canadian. I'm from Minnesota, so
Oh,
unofficially.
but yeah,
So there we go.
100%. One of my absolute best friends is also from Minnesota, and we have the same sensibility, like very similar sensibilities of like politeness and whatnot. So see, this is why we're getting along.
That's right. That's right. Tell us a little bit about Catalyst. Tell us the story
Okay.
about it. Tell us what people can expect if they want to get into your books and
Yeah.
start getting on this journey from the ground up. What can they expect from Catalyst?
Okay.
And give us the lowdown on the book.
The lowdown. All right, I can do that. So yeah, so Catalyst is I call it science fantasy. It's mostly a fantasy novel. It's got little nuggets of sci-fi in there. It's got a little bit of like environmentalism, kind of climate fiction sort of backdrop to it. But really, what it's about is you've got three estranged friends. One is a street magician who kind of turned his back on the other two. One is a heretic who has been kind of cast out from the dominant religion, which I'll mention in a second. And then the third is a retired guard captain who lives in a city to the north, and the three of them basically have to so they had a falling out a long time ago, like 16 years ago, and they have to come back together and put aside all of their crap because there are monsters theoretically that are threatening their world. So there's this whole secret history in this world called Aelda, which is this fractured planet, like literally fractured, like it's in pieces and it's held together in this bubble of magic by these. This is where a little bit of the sci-fi gets in.
Okay.
By these gigantic squid creatures that the people who live on Aelda think are their gods, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But there's this dominant religion that worships the aspects who are these squid gods. But there's a lot of secrets, a lot of stuff that has been kind of erased from history deliberately or otherwise, and it's up to these three characters to unpack that a little bit before disaster strikes. So it's really it's one of these sort of it's very much about the three of them and coming together again and apologizing to each other and healing a little bit, and then by healing the stuff that kind of they're going through, they can then try to heal this world that needs a little bit of TLC, let's say.
So then we get into coming out.
Yep.
Just down the road, October 14th, right?
Yes, indeed.
October 14th, people can get the next book in the series.
Yes, they can.
Which I correctly said Castoff at the beginning of the show.
You did. Yeah, so Castoff comes out on the 14th, and so it's a duology. So Castoff finishes the journey. So again, I don't want to spoil anything for Catalyst, but Catalyst things happen, and there's an agreement made that involves the aspects, that involves these gods, and our kind of central characters need to follow through on that. So Castoff, so if Catalyst is about kind of bringing these characters back together again, Castoff is about like what do you do next, like after you've done the thing and solved that kind of initial theoretically world ending problem, then what do you do? Like how do you kind of chart your path forward now that you've got your friends with you? What does that look like, and how do you follow through on the promises that you make, both to them and to the world at large? That's really what the book's about, but with some like kind of some more secret history stuff and this kind of almost like national treasure sort of vibe of like going from this point to this point to this point and finding more clues. And so it was an absolute blast to write, and so I'm very glad that it's coming out because I got a chance to play with these characters, kind of what I was saying about like how much space do the characters need and how like
Right.
to really tell their story. Like there was a lot more that I think these characters needed, and so I hope readers agree. And so it was very cool to get a chance to I think get these characters to a place where they needed to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Now you mentioned it's a duology.
Yes.
Are you leaving yourself space if your fans coming back like we really want another book? Are you leaving
Oh yeah.
yourself space for that?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
are there plans for like other stuff in the same universe?
Yeah, so I've got, I mean, like, again, to be clear, like there's no, like, there's no huge lingering threads. Like I'm not one of those, I didn't write it as one of those things where like you get to the end and it's like it's a satisfying ending. I will say that, but no, I've got a couple of ideas because like there's always implications, right? Like you
Right.
change something about your world, and and there's always like it's always like, oh, okay, well, like now that that changed, oh, maybe it's going to cause this. So I've got for anyone who's read, see, I don't want to give anything away for
Yeah, don't give
Castoff.
anything away.
No,
No
I'm not giving anything
spoilers.
away.
The answer is
No, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The
Yes, yeah.
answer is
Short
yes.
answer is yes.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a couple of ideas. Who knows what'll, I've got a couple of that I think would be novellas if I ever get around to it,
Okay. Okay.
as opposed to full novels. But yeah, but I don't know. I'm a very never say never sort of author.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Because
can see myself
I've
circling
seen
back.
it a million times. Like
Right?
this is a trilogy, and then they're like, well, some things got left open, so we're gonna make a
Yeah.
fourth book. But because we're doing a fourth, I got to do a
Now we got
fifth.
to do another one, right?
Yeah, it's
Well, a
like, well,
friend of
these are
mine just
too.
did
This one
that,
was
right?
too. The story was too big, so now I got
Yeah,
to,
so now we're gonna
whatever
now
the
we're gonna do another
reasons are,
one,
and then
right? Yeah,
they come back, and all the old books say the final of the trilogy, and they're like, well,
right.
we got to republish all of them now
Yeah, now
because
we got exactly right. We screwed it up. I will say this: it was like when I was first writing Catalyst, and when I kind of first conceived this idea, I was initially thinking trilogy, like genuinely, and then when I was kind of mapping it out and I was looking at what could happen, what the characters needed, I made the conscious decision. I was like, if I try to space it out into a trilogy, I was worried about that. Like some trilogies, you get to that third book and it's like, I don't know that there's enough going on here, or you start adding stuff because you ran out of ideas. Like I've seen trilogies do that, and
right.
I didn't want that, and so I truncated it on purpose, to try to avoid that sort of thing. But then I see, like, it was funny. I mentioned Marie Bilodeau, very very good friend of
Yeah.
mine. So she did that, and I think did it really well because she had oh, I'm going to mix up the trilogies. She had, I think, Keepers of a Broken Land was one of her first trilogies of
Okay.
fantasy trilogy,
Okay.
and then, and this is a long time ago, and then she just finished. We're actually this weekend celebrating the end of that second trilogy, and as well as Castoff. It's something of a broken land, and I probably butchered it, and I'm glad she's not watching this. But like, so she had a second trilogy, and it's the central characters, but like older, like 20 years later.
Okay.
And then she has plans for a third trilogy where the characters are again even older. So you're following like this
Right.
journey of like these protagonists getting older, and how, and like not passing things off to the next generation. It's like, no, we're going to handle it right now. So I think she approached, like, the way she approached this. No, we're going to continue this series, and I think approached it in a way that is really compelling, and leans into character. So I like it when somebody does that,
Yeah.
as opposed to just like falling ass backwards into another book.
For those that are on our live streams, there's the link for the pre-order
Oh, thank you.
for it. So you can definitely
Thank you very much.
check that out. Do you have any other upcoming projects
I mean, I
you
do
want
have,
to talk
yeah.
about? You can talk about.
There's one that I can't, that I really wish I could, and that it drives me insane. But it's funny being like in games writing land, because you do all this stuff and you have no idea when it's going to come out.
Right.
So again, like, for anyone who's fans of the Expanse, their second edition of the role playing game, so it's the Expanse RPG Transport Union Edition, it's coming out to, because of the Kickstarter, so it's, or sorry, backer kit. So it's coming out to backers, I think, very soon. Again, they've had delays because of all sorts of Green Ronin and Diamond Publishing and whatnot,
Yep.
but like,
Yep.
which is, it sucks for them, and I feel bad for them. But so that's coming out, I hope, sometime this year. And I contributed to the core book, and then I wrote an adventure for Free Navy Conflict, and those should both be out this year. I've got, what have I got? I'm cycling through things in my head. Again, the call. So for Sentinel Hill Press, there's a New England bestiary that I wrote a bunch of creatures for, that I'm so stoked to see come out. I think that's going to be out this year. And then other stuff I can't talk about. So yeah. So those should be the next couple of things. Which when they come out will be incredibly cool. But
Okay. People are going to find you at CanCon, October 17th.
Oh, that's right.
19th.
Yeah, see, you know better than I do. I should have just asked you, what am I doing next?
Well, that's
yes.
an upcoming event. So it's a little different section, right?
A little bit. That's true. Yeah, a little different. A little bit. Yeah. So CanCon, which is I help chair here in Ottawa, which is one of the Canada's like longest running industry specific, like industry networking sort of conferences for sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. So that's October 17th to 19th if you happen to be in the area. And we've got other than we're gonna launch Castoff there. Marie has her new book. We've got Premi Mohammed is one of our guests of honor. Kate Hartfield is one of our guests of honor, and Stephen Kotowich, who is the editor behind the year's best Canadian fantasy and science fiction series. He's going to be there, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's this weekend. And then if anybody is in Toronto next month, I have an event at Back of Phoenix Books, which is Toronto's only like exclusively science fiction, fantasy, and horror bookstore. They're an indie bookstore.
Okay.
And I've never done an event there before, which is wild. And so it's very cool. So me and my good friend Avi Silver, who's another Canadian author, we're going to go and do a talk on the messiness of found families and the fact that we think the best found family is a messy found family.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. People can find you at brandoncrilly.com. You're
Correct.
also on Blue Sky at brandoncrilly.bsky. All of the things that comes after that. It's at Brandon Crilly. And on Instagram at brandoncrilly.author over there. So if people want to find Brandon and go and check out and follow all of the things, they can do that there. Get all the updates on the upcoming things that he's not able to talk about today, but he really wants to talk about. When he can talk about them, you'll find them there. So go look.
Someday.
Go look. I'll make sure to try and share them when they pop in my feed as well.
Perfect.
So you can check us out there. Of course, coming up down the road, guys, got something special for you all. Legendary author of many Dune books, Star Wars, X-Files, and so much more, Kevin J. Anderson is going to be joining us live on October 27th. That will be hitting the podcast feeds on the 28th. So again, Kevin J. Anderson joining us October 27th. Podcast hits the feeds on the 28th. Also down the road, we're going to be having author Jerry Shepard, Rodney Thompson, and returning to Epic Realms, Nathan Lowell will be joining us. And the list just goes on, guys. We're just going to keep on rolling. So make sure to follow, rate, review, push all of those buttons. It helps us, and in turns helps our guests. Of course, go and check out epicrealmsmedia.com for all things Epic Realms related. For Brandon Crilly, I am Nick, and I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.